The cuffs were too tight. Cole Brennan had been awake for 36 hours by the time the transport ship dropped out of. Warp in the holding bay went dark. His wrists bled where the magnetic restraints had chafed through the skin. His left eye was swollen nearly shut from the interrogation on Deck 4. None of that was the problem. The problem was that nobody on Earth knew he was here. He had been grabbed off the station at Kepler 7 during a routine cargo run. No charges he could understand. The arresting officers were Vicorian enforcement units, big as refrigerators, with 4 arms and skin the color of old concrete. They spoke to each other in a dialect he could not follow, and they never once looked at him like he was a person worth addressing. He was a thing they had collected. The Vicorian Empire had been at Cold War with the Earth Coalition for 11 years. Cole had been a merchant pilot for 9 of those years, running legitimate trade routes along the outer belt. He had a clean record going back to his first solo flight out of the Luna Depot. None of that mattered now. The transport docked with a sound like a continent shifting. The bay lights came back on, a pale green that turned everything the color of illness. Cole straightened in his seat. There were 6 other prisoners in the hold with him, 3 humans and 3 species he did not recognize. None of them spoke. They had learned by now not to. 4 of them, standard Vicorian unit, heavily armed, moving with the bored efficiency of people who had done this 1,000 times and found it beneath. They unclipped prisoners from the restraint rails and herded them toward the exit ramp without. The station outside the ship was enormous. A Vicorian detention facility, clearly, though it was unlike anything in the intelligence briefings he had skimmed during his years as A. The ceilings were 40 feet high. The corridors were wide enough for 2 of the massive guards to walk shoulder to shoulder without. Everything was metal and stone in that same sick green light. It smelled like recycled atmosphere and something faintly chemical that Cole could not name. They were processed in a room with no chairs. A Vicorian administrator read numbers into a device. A scanner passed over each prisoner. When it reached Cole, it paused, beeped twice, and the administrator said something sharp and fast to the guards. One of the guards grabbed Cole's arm and pulled him out of the line. He was taken down a separate corridor, deeper into the facility. The other prisoners disappeared behind a sealed door. Cole counted the turns. Left, right, straight for a long time, right again. He filed it away. He did not know why yet. Habit from 9 years of navigating places that wanted to confuse him. They put him in a cell at the end of a block that appeared to be otherwise empty. The cell was 6 feet by 8 feet, a light panel in the ceiling that never fully turned off. The door was a solid slab of reinforced composite with a small observation window at eye height, which was useless because the window was designed for a Vicorian's eye height, not his. He sat on the sleeping platform. He thought about his ship, the Gray Heron, docked back at Kepler 7. He thought about his cargo manifest, 300 units of medical-grade polymer sheeting, completely legal, clearly labeled. He thought about the fact that no one at Kepler 7 had been close enough to see the registration, numbers on the arresting unit's transport before it went to warp. He was 31 years old. He had been in bad situations before. This was a different category of bad. On the 3rd day, the guards changed. He had been learning the schedule. Morning check at what he estimated was 0600, based on the meal delivery pattern. Evening check, near 1800. 1 guard per block during overnight hours. Walking the corridor at intervals, he had timed to approximately 40 minutes. The new guard came on at the morning check and was immediately, obviously, not what he expected. She was Vicorian in the technical sense. Same general physiology, same 4 arms, same height advantage over him. But Vicorians had a range, the same way humans did. And she was at the extreme end of it, in ways that made the other guards look like they had been stamped out of a factory. Her coloring was unusual, where the standard Vicorian skin tone ran from gray to deep charcoal. Hers was a pale silver that in certain angles of the green light looked almost blue. Her eyes were gold, not yellow, not amber, the precise color of gold leaf, with a vertical pupil that tracked him through the observation window with something that was not. The bored contempt he had gotten used to. She looked at him like he was a question she was trying to answer. He did not look away. Most prisoners looked away from guards. It was the logical move. Draw no attention, take no challenge, survive. Cole had spent 9 years piloting solo runs through contested space on the strength of his ability to read a situation and respond correctly. This felt like a situation that wanted eye contact. She stood at the window for 3 seconds longer than protocol required. Then she moved on down the corridor. Cole sat back on the sleeping platform. His left eye was healing. His wrists were scabbing over. The food they provided was adequate in a technical sense and terrible in every other sense. But he was eating it because not eating would make him stupid, and he could not afford to be stupid. Meals, footsteps, the interval between the light panels barely perceptible flickers, which suggested a power cycling pattern of roughly 90 minutes. He started building a map of everything he could know from inside 6 feet by 8 feet. And on the 4th morning, when she came back on shift and stopped at his window, he did not look away again, and neither did she. The question on her face was still there. It had gotten more specific. The name she gave him was Zara, not her full Vicorian name, which was 8 syllables long and contained sounds the human throat had to actively embarrass. Zara was what she said when he asked. After 6 days of window silences that had been growing longer each time, if she had a name he could use. She had looked at him for a moment before answering. She said Zara like it was a translation, like she was handing him something she had already decided he would not drop. Cole had been awake at that point for 6 days in a detention cell with no contact, no information, and no indication of when or if he would face any formal process. He had been running on rationed sleep, mental cataloging, and a stubbornness that his first commanding officer had once described as the most useless and useful quality a pilot could have. He said, "My name is Cole." She said, "I know your name. It is in your file." He said, "What does my file say?" She looked down the corridor in both directions. The block was still empty of other prisoners, which he had started to think was not an accident. She said, "It says you are a merchant pilot from the Earth Coalition. It says you were detained for transit without Vicorian clearance through a contested sector." He said, "I had Coalition clearance. That sector is disputed, not Vicorian sovereign space." She said, "That is a matter of some political disagreement." He said, "I know. I just wondered what the file said." Her gold eyes moved back to him. That quality was back. The one that was not contempt and not warmth, but something that lived in the space between those. She said, "You have been very quiet since you arrived." He said, "I have been thinking." She said, "About what?" He said, "About everything I can learn from this cell." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "And what have you learned?" He said, "The power cycles every 90 minutes. The east corridor has a longer echo than the west, which means a larger space beyond that wall. The food comes from the facility's southeast quadrant, based on the direction the heat signature comes from before the slot opens. The overnight guard takes 40 minutes per pass, but the third pass on the northwest side takes 44 minutes, which means something slows him down at that end. Zara stared at him. She said, "You measured all of that from in there." He said, "I had time." She did not move. She stood at his window and she looked at him, and he watched her process something. He did not know what. He did not know her. He had spoken to her for a total of 4 minutes across 6 days, but he knew the look of someone recalibrating. He had seen it in traders and station officials and coalition officers, and once in a very dangerous pirate who had decided mid-negotiation that Cole was more useful alive than otherwise. Recalibration was a good sign. She said, "Why are you telling me this?" He said, "Because I want you to know what I am, before you decide what to do with that." He ate his morning ration. The polymer texture of the grain product they fed him still tasted like cardboard processed by a machine that hated food, but he ate it with the focus of someone doing maintenance. She came back at the end of her shift. She stood at the window again and she said, "There are 42 active guards on this block rotation, 17 cameras covering the east wing corridors. The southwest maintenance corridor has been under repair for 3 days, and 2 of its cameras are offline while the work is ongoing." He said, "How long will the repair take?" She said, "The work order says 5 more days." He said, "That is very specific information." She said, "You told me what you were. I am telling you what I am." He looked at her. The gold eyes did not waver. She was doing the thing he had done, laying out her position clearly, making sure he understood that she was choosing this, not stumbling into it. She said, "Because the file also says that you were in the Kepler 7 system running medical supplies to the outer settlement colonies, and because I have been a guard in this facility for 2 years, and in that time I have seen 14 humans pass through, and none of them were here for real reasons." The last sentence hit him somewhere below the chest, not because it was surprising, because it confirmed something he had been not quite letting himself fully think. He said, "Are there other humans here now?" 2 in the main block, 1 in the high-security wing. None of them know about the others. He said, "Can you get to all 3? She looked at him for a long time. She said, "I have thought about this for 2 days. Since you told me about the power cycles and the echo, I have thought about the risk. I've thought about what happens to me if this goes wrong." He said, "I know." She said, "And I have thought about what it means that I've watched this happen 14 times. He said, "What did you decide?" She said that doing nothing is also a choice. She looked at him. Not the assessment look this time. Something that had resolved past assessment into something quieter and more solid. She said, "There is a shift change in 4 days. There is a window of 11 minutes where the East Wing has no active guard presence. The cameras in the Southwest Maintenance Corridor will still be offline." He said 11 minutes. She said, "For 4 people who know exactly where they are going, it is enough." He said, "You would be giving up everything." She said, "I would be giving up a job I am ashamed of." They looked at each other through the small window, the one built for a Vicorian's eye height that he had to angle up slightly to see through. He said, "Tell me the layout." For 2 hours, she stood at the window and she talked, quiet and methodical, and he listened with the focused, total attention of a pilot who had navigated through asteroid fields by instrument alone in the dark. He built the map in his head, corridor by corridor, checkpoint by checkpoint, the location of the 3 other humans, the timing of every moving piece. She knew this facility the way he knew the gray heron. Every place where the institution's confidence in itself had made it sloppy. When she was done, she said, "Do you have questions?" She answered all of them. When she finally left, Cole sat in the small cell in the pale green light and felt, for the first time since Kepler 7, like a pilot again, not a file number. A pilot with a route and a window and the information he needed to fly it. The first problem arrived on day 2. One of the 3 other humans, a man named Drew Carver, was 2 blocks east in the general population wing. Zara had confirmed his location through the record system under the pretext of a routine prisoner. Drew was 38, a coalition surveyor, had been in the facility for 4 months. He was in reasonable physical condition. The second human was a woman named Luz Vargas, a graduate researcher who had been on a sanctioned academic survey of a neutral zone system when her shuttle was seized. She was in the same wing as Drew, 3 cells down. The third human was the problem. His name was Pete Holloway. He was in the high-security wing. That wing had its own guard rotation, its own camera system, and its own sealed access doors that required a Level 3 authorization code that Zara did not. Cole heard all of this during Zara's shift on day 2, delivered through the window in the same quiet, methodical tone she used for everything. He said, "Can you get the code?" She said, "Level 3 authorization belongs to the wing commanders. There are 2 on rotation. One of them I do not know well. The other one I trust less than I trust a broken airlock." He said, "Is there another way into that wing?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There is a maintenance junction that connects the high-security wing to the east. It is not on the standard facility map. It was built during the original construction and sealed off when the wing was upgraded. The seal is a manual bolt, not an electronic lock." He said, "And you know about it because," she said, "because I have spent 2 years memorizing every flaw in this building." The pause this time was different. The gold eyes moved away from the window for a moment, then came back. She said, "Because I always knew that one day I would want to know." He did not push. She had been clear that she was choosing this and clear about her reasons, and that was enough. People carried their own architecture of decision. He respected the walls she had not offered to open. He said, "If we use the maintenance junction to reach Pete Holloway, how does it change the timing?" She said, It adds 6 minutes to the route, which means the 11-minute window becomes a 5-minute window for the final exit. He said 5 minutes. She said, 5 minutes if everything works. He said, is the route through the maintenance junction something you could walk in the dark? He said, could you walk it in the dark carrying someone who could not see where they were going? Then she said, I would need to know you trusted me completely. He looked at her. He said, I mapped this cell for 6 days before I spoke to you. I spoke to you because every piece of data I could collect told me you were worth speaking to. I have spent 9 years making navigation decisions in the dark based on available data. He said, I trust you. The thing that moved through her gold eyes was not the assessment look, and it was not the quiet, resolved look from before. It was something he did not have a clean word for, something that belonged to a Vakorian emotional vocabulary. He was only beginning to understand, though. She said, day 4. Shift change at 1400. He said, I will be ready. She said, I need to tell the others. He said, be careful who you are to them before you tell them. They do not have context. They will not understand you the way I do. She said, how do you know you understand me? He said, I do not. But I understand that you looked at 14 wrong things and did nothing, and then on the 15th, you decided you were done doing nothing. That is not a person who moves on impulse. That is a person who takes a long time to reach a line and then does not go back from it. The long pause again. She said, that is very accurate. He said, I had a lot of time to observe. Something shifted in her face. Vakorians did not smile the way humans did, but the muscle architecture around her jaw softened in a way that did something close to the same. He lay on the sleeping platform and stared at the ceiling and ran the route over and over in his. A manual bolt that had not been touched in years that might have rusted or might not. A level 3 wing that was designed to hold people who were never meant to leave. Pete Holloway had been in there for 7 months. Cole did not know what 7 months in high security did to a person. He would find out on day 4. He kept running the route. He kept the map clean and exact and ready. Zara appeared at the window one more time before the day ended. She did not say anything. She looked at him for 2 seconds. Then she continued her pass. He understood what the look meant. It meant the others had been told. It meant they were in. It meant there was no version of day 4 now that was not happening. The morning of day 4. Cole ate his ration with complete focus and then stood in the center of his cell and ran through every physical thing he could do in 6 feet by 8 feet. He had been doing this every morning, but this time it was different. This time it was the last time. At 1200, Zara came on shift. She did not stop at his window. She walked the corridor at standard pace, checked the roster at the block entrance, and continued. But as she passed his door, she dropped her hand to her side for exactly 1 second and extended 2 fingers. At 1340, he heard something change in the corridor sound, a different weight to the footsteps, a shift in the air pressure that meant a door somewhere in the east wing had opened. At 1347, the observation window slid open, not just the viewing panel, the whole window housing, which was not supposed to open, except that Zara was standing in the corridor holding a manual release tool that was not standard. She said quietly, Drew Carver and Luz Vargas are already in the service corridor. We have a problem. He said, tell me. She said, the maintenance junction bolt is corroded. I cannot move it alone. He said, how corroded? She said, enough that I need a second set of arms, and you do not have 4. He looked at her. She looked at him. He said, 2 hands, and the right angle can do what 4 hands can do wrong. Show me where to put them. She reached into the housing and unlatched the door from the inside. He stepped into the corridor for the first time in 10 days, and the ceiling height hit him like a 40 feet above and still somehow feeling smaller than the sky. She was fast in the corridor in a way that made his 9 years of navigation feel theoretical. She knew every step, every camera angle, every pause point. He matched her pace. She did not look back to check on him. She had decided to trust, and she trusted completely. He filed that away. They reached Drew and Luce in the service corridor junction. Drew was a lean man with a surveyor's practical efficiency. Luce was compact and sharp-eyed and looked like someone who had spent 4 months converting fear. They each looked at Zara with the complicated expression of people who had been told by their prison guard that she was going to help them escape. Cole said quietly, She's why we are here. Luz looked at him. They moved to the maintenance junction. The bolt was a corroded manual seal set into the wall at chest height, designed for a Vakorian's chest height, which meant Cole was reaching up at an awkward angle. Zara's two left arms took the main leverage positions. Cole put both hands on the lower section of the bolt housing, and they found the angle together, the place where his two hands and her four could work the same direction. It did not move. It did not move. A shriek of old metal. And then the bolt slid, and the door behind it opened on a tunnel that was dark and smelled like concrete that had not breathed in years. Zara said into the tunnel. Count 40 steps and stop. The darkness was total. He ran his left hand along the wall and counted. And at 40 steps, Luz made a soft sound that meant she had found the far door without running. Zara came through the dark faster than any of them. She passed Cole without touching him and found the far door by memory and opened it. The high-security wing was on the other side. It was quieter than the main block. The cells here had no observation windows. Zara went to the third door on the left and used a manual override tool on the lock panel. Pete Holloway was sitting on his sleeping platform. He had a beard that had not been there 7 months ago, presumably, and eyes that had been in the dark long enough to adjust to everything. He looked at Zara. He said, "You're a guard." Cole stepped into the doorway. He said, "She is the reason you are leaving." They had used 3 minutes and 40 seconds of the 5-minute window. The exit point was the southwest maintenance corridor with its 2 offline cameras. Zara led them at a pace that was barely below running, and Drew and Luz kept up without being asked. Because 4 months in a cell teaches a person to move when moving is available. The corridor opened at the far end into a service bay. The service bay had an exterior dock connection. The dock connection had a small, automated freight shuttle on standby cycle, a regular supply ship whose departure was logged in the system for 14:15, which was 3 minutes away. Zara had logged it herself. Under a supply order, she had authored and approved with her own authorization. She had planned every single piece of this. Cole looked at her. She was standing at the shuttle dock access panel, entering the departure authorization. Her 4 hands moved across the controls with the precision of someone who had run this sequence in her head every night for 3 days. She did not look up. She said, "The shuttle runs an automated route to the Kepler 7-way station. The journey is 11 hours. There is food in the secondary storage bay. The communication system is locked to freight-only band, but I have set it to accept a coalition." Luz said, "What about you?" Zara said, "I have a shift report that logs me as conducting prisoner welfare checks from 1400 to. It will cover the window. By the time the discrepancy is found, you will be past Vakorian jurisdiction." Drew said, "What happens to you then?" Zara did not answer. Cole looked at her. He said, "That is not a plan. That is a delay." She said, "It is enough." He said, "It is not enough and you know it." She turned to look at him. The thing in them now was something he had not seen before. Not assessment, not resolution. Something that was tired in the way that people get tired when they have been deciding something for a long time and have finally decided it. He said, "There is room for 5. She said, "I have a post." He said, "You had a post. You opened my cell door with an unauthorized tool 40 minutes ago. You are already past the point where the post exists." The 3 other humans were very quiet. Zara looked at him. She said, "You are certain?" He said, "I have been certain since you told me you had been watching this happen 14 times. You were not staying for the job. You were staying because leaving felt like starting over, and starting over is terrifying. I have done it." He said, "The shuttle holds 5. The dock alarm would trigger in 90 seconds when the automated departure sequence activated, without an authorized manifest override." She looked at the shuttle. She looked at Cole. She stepped through the dock. He was last again. The shuttle lifted from the dock on its automated route, and the Vakorian detention facility fell. Away behind them in the dark, and the stars came up in the freight shuttle's small forward viewport, like something the universe had been saving for the right moment. Drew was in the co-pilot seat running the communications panel. Luz had found the food storage and was distributing ration packs with the focused generosity of someone who understood that food after captivity is a serious matter. Pete was asleep before the shuttle had cleared the facility's gravity field. Sitting upright in his seat with his chin on his chest, already trusting the vehicle the way prisoners trust any moving thing that is moving away. Zara stood at the forward viewport. Cole stood next to her. The stars moved past at freight shuttle speed, which was not fast, but was free, which was the only speed that counted. She said, "I do not know what I'm going to do," he said. "I know something about starting over from nothing with a ship and a route and no clear." She said, "You do." He said, "It is terrible for the first 2 weeks, and then it becomes its own thing." She said, "You are describing your own experience." She said, "You are saying it like it might apply to 2 people." She looked at the stars. The gold eyes caught the light from the viewport. She said, "Your ship, is it still at Kepler 7? He said, "If nobody has impounded it for 10 days of unpaid dock fees, yes." She said, "Is it large enough for 2? He said, "It is a single-pilot vessel technically. There is a second seat." She said, "I have experience with Vicorian nav systems, which are a different architecture than," he said, "that would make me more capable, not less." She said, "I am not asking as a trade." He said, "I know." The silence between them was the kind that had weight, not the absence of things to say, the presence of things that were still being understood. He said, "I have 11 hours before Kepler 7. He said, "I would like to spend them talking to you." She looked at him, that thing in her face, the thing that was close to a smile without being one. She said, "You already know how to find my answers. You observe until the data is enough." He said, "I think for this particular question, I want to ask directly." The stars went past. She said, "Then ask." He said, "Who are you? Who are you when none of that is the context?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she started talking, and he listened the way he always listened, the way he had listened in the cell, with the complete and focused attention of someone who understood that information is only as valuable as the quality of attention you bring to it. And the freight shuttle moved through the dark at the only speed that counted. And behind them, the Vicorian detention facility grew small and then disappeared. And ahead, Kepler 7 and the Gray Heron, and something that was not yet named but was already real. The stars were everywhere. They kept talking until the first light of the way station appeared in the viewport, and Drew said, "Coalition frequency? I have contact," and the 11 hours were gone. Cole looked at Zara. She was already looking at him. Whatever calculation had lived in her gold eyes for 10 days had finished running. The answer was already there. They just needed time to learn its name.